Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. If you're a fan of true crime stories, make sure to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, that's available also on every major podcasting platform. Alright, on to today's compliance stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Club Wag. Shady boss lied about my position to keep me from policy allowed benefit for years. I found out, and it changed everything. A few years ago, I worked at a big retail company and had for many years. Eventually, I went through enough grad school education to get my license to work at a higher level. Much more pay, more job satisfaction, more responsibilities, fancy title, but the job market was rough. I stayed on with my company to work in a floater position where I would cover a large area and work at all the stores within that area on a rotating but irregular basis. Eventually, I wanted to get a staff position where I have a single store assigned. The area was huge, the furthest store being over 100 miles from my home, and that is exactly where I was assigned to train for the new role. It was a rough store. Folks in my position were robbed and assaulted at gunpoint. Neighborhood was very unfriendly. Volume at the store was among the highest in the state. Staff turnover was, as you might expect, extreme. Well, after training, I wasn't really being scheduled to float to other stores, once a month at most. I asked to be scheduled a little more diversely, since most of the stores in my area were much closer to my home and didn't require 4 hours of driving a day. Boss man told me that I was the only floater experienced enough to handle that store. I didn't buy it, but what can you do, right? Well, a colleague told me about the mileage reimbursement policy. Floaters working at a store more than 50 miles from home can file for reimbursement of mileage over that 50 miles each way. Can even include meals. So I filled a few of these out and sent them to my boss to sign. He didn't quite refuse, but he never actually signed and filed them. I suspect as soon as I left his office at our district center, he tossed them out. Boss man tells me later that they must be lost in the system. Eventually, the same colleague showed me how to fax those same forms to accounts payable, bypassing the district boss man. So I started doing just that. One day, boss man calls me in a panic. He wants me to stop filing the forms. I ask to be floated closer to home, but he won't budge. He needs me at that miserable store. He promises me he'll make me a staff role at that store if I promise to stop faxing those forms. Staff roles are a promotion and usually come with better pay and a few other little conveniences, so I agree. Bossman says there won't be a pay bump right away, but that it'll come down the road. That never happened. 2 years later, the situation at the store has become too toxic for even me. I asked to step down from the staff position to be a floater again and be allowed to float to other stores. Bossman says that I'm already a floater, was never in a staff position, but that he can't let me work at other stores because it's better for me and the customers if I stay there for familiarity. Floaters do not get scheduled to stores exclusively, so I'm being singled out because they are still desperate to cover that dump of a store. I'm livid, so I start looking. It took me months, but eventually I found an opportunity to make my dream career transition. I put in my formal notice, and that's when the fun started. Remember that whole mileage reimbursement policy? Well, I kept meticulous track of all my shifts, and there is no statute of limitations baked into the policy. So I started filling out those reimbursement forms to retroactively cover every single shift from the past 2 odd years. I skipped the meal part since I didn't want to go through all that effort of finding receipts. I had a friendly store manager sign off on them, and I started sending them to accounts payable directly again. I didn't fax them all in at once, but for each shift in my final 2 weeks, I faxed a few dozen in. We still have fax machines in that line of work, believe it or not. I figured, what do I have to lose? Worst case scenario, accounts payable declines the forms. On my last few shifts, I started getting the checks from accounts payable, not added to my paycheck, but sent to me directly. Mileage reimbursements are non-taxable income, so this was all tax-free money coming to me. It must have taken a while for the charges to show up on a balance sheet because a few weeks after my final paycheck, I got a call from my now former boss man. He wasn't happy. He got some big loss prevention manager involved, and together they started saying I was breaking some rule by requesting the payments. They specifically claimed I was ineligible because I agreed I wouldn't be eligible in a staff position. They then threatened legal action against me if I didn't remit the full amounts back that same week. But I had the email chain from when Bossman said I was never staff and always a floater. I politely referenced that email chain before letting them know firmly that because I was lied to, our prior agreement didn't apply, and I was fully eligible all along. Corporate policy, as confirmed by HR, agreed with me, so I let them know I wasn't returning a single penny. In the end, the reimbursement amounted to well over $21,000, and I transitioned into my dream job. I could say that I would trade that money back for the time I lost commuting to that miserable store, 4 hours every shift, but all that pressure motivated me to making the best career move of my life. The great satisfaction of not only professionally surpassing my old boss, but getting to tell him that his lies cost him way more on the way out is almost priceless. I also shared my story and method with many colleagues who were being told wrongly by the boss man that they didn't qualify for this policy. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, "Edit, thank you for all the support and comments. As many of you correctly guessed, I was working as a community pharmacist. I do want to clarify that most of my coworkers, technicians, pharmacists, front-end staff, and customers and patients were amazing people. Between them and my subscription to Audible with a long list of books I always wanted to read, it made the situation such that I could tolerate that commute for all that time. The job market for retail pharmacy was and is very rough, and I can't overstate that enough. It has empowered big chains to abuse staff in this and other ways, and that also endangers patient care, not to mention staff mental health. I spent more than 10 months searching before I found an opportunity, and that involved me leaving the profession entirely. The district manager boss man and the store general manager, who was fully complicit in the lie, are both still working for the company, last I saw. Moral of the story, please understand your company policies and ignore any verbal agreements or HR unsupported decrees otherwise. And be kind to your pharmacy staff. The job and companies are not always kind to them." Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called 02K30C1. It says, "Life lesson, when a manager tells you they can't increase your pay now, but it's coming down the road, they're lying." Another commenter called Sawsku said, "Remember, a promotion without a raise is not a promotion." I fully agree with both of these commenters, especially the first one, because you're not going to make any more money down the road. They're just saying that to satiate you now. It's the same thing when a boss says, "Hey, there'll be more hours later down the road." No, there won't. As far as a promotion without a raise not being a promotion, well, that depends on how you're looking at it. It may not be a promotion at the current company, but it is something that can go on your resume, a shiny new title that can help you get into a job at another company for better money. So it could be a promotion, just not with the current company. This story comes to us from Roseblade Phantom. "Boss got mad at me for wasting time organizing. How I realized my job wastes more money than I make." Story: spent a ridiculous amount of time looking for pens, important keys, and work essentials yesterday. In fact, that's every day for the last year. Spent the last 15 minutes of work yesterday organizing our 2 main drawers that were cramped with things from over the year, and making sure daily essentials were easily accessible. Came into work today, typical day, things got super slow, so I continued my organizing efforts. Found hundreds of dollars in equipment that had been forgotten over the years, but mostly trash I discarded. Took about an hour in between pausing to take care of immediate things. I was almost finished when boss comes over and starts haphazardly organizing things basically complaining I'm being too thorough, and that we weren't going to be using this precious time to organize. I asked if everything was okay, and got snapped at as boss swept what was left to organize back into the drawer. I then spent the next 20 minutes doing nothing, expecting the theatrics to be followed by what was supposedly so much more important. 20 minutes. It would have taken me less than 10 to finish organizing while not having any further instruction. I open the drawer, messy once more, and see boss's phone. I close the drawer. I mean, this is the level of organization we aspire for, right? Who am I to waste time questioning this? Boss eventually gives me a sheet to check inventories with. I haven't been trained on this particular task, I make that clear, but I'm barked at about how simple it is. The sheet doesn't make any sense, so eventually boss comes over and starts trying to storm through it. Oh, wrong sheet? Man, if only we were organized. Eventually get to the end of it and we're missing hundreds of dollars in inventory. Boss had been helping, so I clearly state that I had approached my task carefully, one by one and in order, with double checks, and I knew I hadn't messed up. Eventually boss asks if I've seen their phone. I say yes. Where? You organized it, don't you remember? Boss barks at me with the same question. I say they swept it into the drawer with everything else. Boss says they don't remember that, and I say nothing as boss returns to their office. Why didn't I say anything? It was all on camera anyway. In the perfect spot, actually. I'm quitting this job shortly, so I didn't feel the need to make it a big deal. OP wrote an epilogue at the bottom. It says, a former coworker, a great one, visited and confirmed that things in the drawer were years old. We have a pretty high turnover rate, and it's because employees either don't care or actually do care and are penalized for it, or both. We've lost 2 senior employees in a month, and I'm just sitting here with a secret deadline until I'm out too. Though after today, why not at least look for another job? I can already hear myself, why did I leave my last job? We didn't share the same values on organization. I felt a lot of man hours were being wasted due to an unorganized environment. I've shot up the totem pole a lot because of turnover and have accepted increased responsibilities. By my calculations, in just a month, we've wasted somewhere around $3,000 due to lack of organization, and that's only from the responsibilities I've inherited. If things are proportional in each department, that number multiplies easily. This means organizational mishaps cost my job more than I even make. P.S. Would it be unethical to ask for a raise, knowing full darn well no amount they pay me is going to make me stay more than a few months? Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Government San. It says, ask for it, you're already doing increased duties. Worst that can happen is they say no, and you can add that to the list of reasons you are leaving. You can also use that higher rate of pay to help you get even more money at your next job. As for the ethics of it, as far as I'm concerned, as long as you don't say anything that implies you will leave if you don't get the raise, or that you will stay if you do, then you're good. They may draw those conclusions anyway, or they may not, but as long as you are careful not to intentionally mislead them, then I think it's okay. OP responded and said, I'm pretty careful with my words, as far as professionally speaking, so I definitely wouldn't say anything until I was certain I wanted to, and had already thought out the possible outcomes. Right now, my conflict is, do I show up with charts and spreadsheets about how much money has been verifiably wasted that I could have saved, effectively putting everyone on blast? Or do I keep it short and simple and say, I've inherited a lot of responsibility from my former coworkers, and I'm being paid significantly less than them. I believe I deserve a raise. Also, I don't pry into my coworkers' finances, but I do note every single time they're brought up, and often mention at appropriate times that it's important for coworkers to know how much everyone is being paid, so everyone knows they're being paid fairly, and that it's a corporate tactic to keep employees in the dark and make such conversations taboo. It's good to know if a new guy or lazy person is getting paid the same amount I am, or know that the employee who took an ex-coworker's position is getting paid less for the same role. I refuse to be effed. Yep, OP, at this point, the best thing you can do is ask for that raise, and the worst thing they can do is say no. You're already looking for another job anyway, so even if they say no, it is just more reason for you to go find something else. And I agree with the first commenter that even if they do give you the raise, you can still go find a better job and use that raise to get even more money at that better job. I think either way you go on this one, you're going to come out ahead. This story comes to us from MD Lapla. New boss gives angry me an impossible task. I don't know if this is exactly malicious compliance, kind of a revenge story. I used to work for a big IT consulting company notorious for not paying overtime. I worked for a client's migration project for almost 1.5 years, leading the functional migration team. The three of us worked for the client 3 years before the start of the migration project, so we knew the data we had to migrate, all the nuances, and 2 weeks before the migration date, 99% of the data was already migrated and validated. We only did the day-by-day new data and sag off pretty much those last 2 weeks. Other managers that outranked me became extremely angry about our calmness because the part she led was behind schedule due to her bad scheduling, and everyone was being overworked because of her mishaps. Come migration date Saturday starting at 9 a.m., everyone was expecting long hours of work, but we clocked out at noon with the data validated with the client and the go-ahead signed, sealed, and delivered. My team got a written commendation from the client. The manager's team spent the entire weekend there. She got a complaint letter from the client. The manager complained about us and made me and my senior analyst spend the next month waiting for incidences, bugs, and complaints. We got 5 in the whole month. My senior analyst spent 8 hours a day studying a new language. I took the chance to update my CV, I wanted out, and pretty much help a couple former colleagues that needed to solve bugs and problems within the manager's team responsibilities. A couple weeks later, evaluation time. At the IT company, everyone was graded A to D, A being exceeding expectations, D being you're out of here. B was good, C was pretty much, I'm starting to think you might not be good to work here. Given the commendation from the client, I was expecting an A. My evaluation was done by the manager and my mentor, a close friend with the manager. They gave me a C because we didn't see any pressure on your work and you certainly lack motivation. I complained and took a long overdue, already planned month-long vacation. This was June. After that, back at work, I was assigned to a project on another client led by manager's husband. He wanted me to prepare 122 integrations with different systems in 4 months. I told him that in the previous project led by his wife, they took 2 years to have 12 integrations ready, but I would give it a shot. I even emailed him the planning where it clearly showed the time they took. 2 of those months were July and August, months where pretty much all the client goes on holiday. Manager and wife also went on holiday pretty much all of August. I spent those 2 months chasing people around the client's office, but starting September, 6 integrations were closed and 6 more were almost closed pending validation. Manager came back from holidays and was furious. He called me a slacker and started telling me that his wife was right, that I lacked motivation, and that I would need to spend the rest of the project duration working till midnight to make up for lost time. And I said, no, I won't do an hour more than what you're paying. I told you that your expectations were unrealistic, and you went ahead with them anyways. He went ballistic. I replied, I just lack motivation to work in your project. I want out of the project. I was out of the project in no time. I got a call from my mentor. She said that they were evaluating firing me without pay because of this. I told them about the unrealistic planning. She said that I was being unrealistic and that the planning was good. I produced the email I sent the manager. My mentor went quiet. A minute later, she told me, what do you want? If you can't guarantee I won't do an hour of overtime ever again, I want out, full severance, and then some, and I want the company to make it look like I quit, not that you fired me. She went quiet again. She said she'll see what she can do. I was out of there smiling by the end of the day. P.S. From the team that remained in the project, 4 guys were on my team before the migration project. They all complained. They all got out of the project as well. As far as I know, the project took twice the expected time to be completed. Manager's husband nearly got fired. Wife held a lot of power and managed to save his butt. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called UberNuber. It says, not the point of your post, but I want to point out that a mentor, among other things, is a person that has your back and advocates for you. Your mentor doesn't sound like much of a mentor. OP responded and said she was, until her friend complained against me. Another user called 4Dwarf said, so in the 2 months you worked on it, you got 6 done and 6 one step away from being done. If I'm reading your post right, you did the same amount of work they did in almost 2 years. I know nothing of your fieldwork, but it sounds like you just knocked them out the best you could in a reasonable time frame. OP responded and said, I actually did my best with the time and situation I was dealt with. I told them I was going to give it a shot, and I did. The manager really thought that it was a piece of cake when it wasn't. Don't you love when a manager says, you lack motivation, and then they toss so much work on you that it's impossible to get it done in the time frame that they're looking for? It almost feels like they're trying to get you out without actually saying they want you to leave. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. Don't forget to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, which you can find on any major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.